Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel, and today we're going to look at 12 new Twilight Masquerade decks that you can build when the set does go live. Of course, the set does come out on Pokemon TCG Live tomorrow. It's coming out a little bit earlier than the sets usually launch on Pokemon TCG Live, which I'm excited for. Of course, earlier the better. And in this video, like I said, we're going to look at 12 new decks from the new set. If you're looking to build something for tomorrow when the set does come out, whether you're testing for NEIC or you just want to mess around and play with some new cards, hopefully this video helps y'all out. Y'all seem to really enjoy these videos where I look at a bunch of different decks from a new set heading into the set launch. So hopefully y'all are excited for this video. If you are, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe down below to help me on the road to reaching 14,000 subscribers here on the second channel. I'm excited. The set's going to be a banger. There's a lot of really cool cards, a lot of really interesting decks to come out of the set. It's going to be a game-changing set for sure. Definitely a format-changing set, which I'm excited for. And I think without further ado, let's take a look at some lists now. Alright, starting things off, we got Dragapult EX, which is by far the best deck to come out of Twilight Masquerade. Dragapult is going to change the format quite a bit due to its attack, allowing you to knock out low HP basics pretty easily. Now, Dragapult is a very strong card, but I think we're still in the stages, especially since the set has not come out yet, where we don't actually know what the best way to play Dragapult EX is yet. We don't know if it's with Pidgeot. The build here that I really like to show off is the Xatu build. This did win one of the last City Leagues in Japan currently, and I think that this deck definitely does have some potential with Xatu. Xatu does give you a draw engine and also gives you an energy acceleration engine for your Dragapult. Dragapult's attack does require a Psychic and a Fire energy to do 200 damage, and then you put 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like. Again, a very annoying attack. You can literally knock out low HP basics like Charmanders and Comfeys and Manaphy's super duper easily. Can't be stopped by Jirachi, which is really annoying. And then you have Dracloak, which does give you a mini draw engine. It lets you look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put one in your hand and the other at the bottom of your deck. So you have a bit of a draw engine with the Dragapult line having Dracloak, and then of course Xatu giving you some draw. And then you have Tatsugiri in the deck, allowing you to look at the top 6 cards of your deck and get a supporter. It's a very simplistic approach to Dragapult, but sometimes simplicity is all you really need. Again, there's a few ways to play Dragapult that are going around right now, and until NEIC is over, we're going to probably have to figure out what the best way to play it is heading into it, and Xatu seems to be one of the better ways. It's a little bit more of a straightforward approach to Dragapult EX, but I didn't want to show a Dragapult list in today's video, and I wanted to show off a more simplistic approach. I think Dragapult is one of the free decks you get with Live, and that might come with Xatu. I don't quite know the list yet, but if it is, this could be a good way to kind of get into the Dragapult groove by playing it with Xatu, because then you have an energy acceleration engine for the attack, because it does require a Fire and a Psychic. And you do have access to Radiant Alakazam in the deck to manipulate the damage. Got the Prime Catcher Ace back again. Just a very vanilla, straightforward concept, but sometimes all you need to win a game of the Pokemon TCG. Ben sniping is about to become a very big deal within the TCG thanks to the release of Greninja EX and Dragapult. Now, here is a Greninja deck I wanted to look at. Now, there's actually a couple of Greninja decks I'm going to be providing in this video. Both builds are actually very different. This build is a Pidgeot EX build. It actually plays very similarly to Charizard, where you have Pidgeot, you have Rotom, you have 4 Seal Stone in the deck to basically allow you to set up your Greninja kind of like how you would set up Charizard with the Pidgeot Rotom engine. But yeah, Greninja does have that attack that is 170 damage and allows you to get any card out of your deck. Combine that with Pidgeot's ability to also get any card out of your deck. Every single turn, you're effectively getting 2 cards out of your deck, and this allows you to pull off some pretty insane plays, especially with Greninja's other attack that does 120 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, of course, you do need to play double Turbo Energy to build it up. If they do have a Manaphy in play, it can get sketchy, but when you're playing both a Pidgeot and Greninja's attack every turn without getting Iono'd, you're actually able to just go Prime Catcher, canceling Cologne, plus double Turbo fairly easily to easily cripple your opponent's bench. Greninja does have some cool traits. Like I said, has a good snipe attack. The first attack can do relevant damage for just a single water energy. There's a lot of different plays you can make with the deck, especially when you're able to get any card you want every single turn with Greninja. The biggest issue Greninja is probably going to face, however, is most likely going to be not only Dragapult, which can easily eat up your Froakies, but also has to deal with Gardevoir. Greninja is weak to Psychic. Despite being a fighting Pokemon, it is weak to Psychic, meaning that you will get destroyed by Gardevoir, even though you technically have Snipe plays available to take out their Kirlias. Guardy's going to be a difficult matchup nonetheless. I definitely think that is going to be Greninja's biggest obstacle in the format, is going to be how popular Gardevoir is going to be. But if you want a nice, very, straightforward, consistently strong Greninja list that plays like Charizard and you're looking to try it out, definitely try out Pidgeot Greninja. Greninja could get pretty good too if we see more Lightning Seymour play, especially with Miraidon potentially coming back in the format as a top-tier contender. Iron Hands ain't going anywhere either. In fact, it might get even better within Lost Box and within Lugia, thanks to Legacy Energy. So definitely keep your eye on Greninja EX. It's definitely a very strong card that I'm excited to see what people can cook up for it. All right, now this is a deck I am really excited for. We got the Dipplin Thwacky Festival Grounds box deck. This deck actually looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to play, and if Charizard continues to stay in the format, this deck actually could be decent against it. Now, Dipplin does have an ability when there's a Festival Grounds in play, you can attack twice, and then, of course, you have Thwacky, which if your active Pokemon has the ability Festival Lead, which, you know, Dipplin happens to have, you get to search your deck for any card you want, which is very similar to Pidgeot EX, which we all know is a very powerful card. So this is a cool engine for a deck, and definitely this deck seems like it could be good thanks to the ability that Thwacky has. Getting every card out of your deck every turn is pretty good, even if you're playing more of a mediocre attacker with Dipplin that does 20 damage for each of your bench Pokemon. Now, like I said, when you have Festival Grounds in play, you're able to do 200 damage essentially because you can attack twice. Now, that is enough to one-hit KO a Charizard EX. I guarantee if this deck actually existed in our current format, it would probably be pretty decent, but unfortunately, because we're waiting until Twilight Masquerade comes out, the deck might not be as good, and that's because it gets eaten up by Dragapult. I mean, all your Pokemon have low HP. Thwacky, Grookey, Dipplin. Of course, Applin only has 40 HP, which is very easy food for Dragapult. Now, the deck here that I got does have the Rabsca in the deck. Now, Rabsca's ability does prevent Dragapult from damaging the bench. Now, if you can set the Rabsca up before Dragapult knocks out your Rellor, you're actually going to be able to block Dragapult from eating your bench alive, which is one thing this deck does need to prevent from happening, is because Dragapult will, of course, destroy your bench. You have to be very cautious of that, and that's where it's nice to have access to the Rabsca. Now, how good this deck actually is going to be up in the air, because it does have a good engine, right? Being able to attack twice is good. You're doing 200 damage every turn for 1 energy on a 1-prizer. That's pretty solid, and you do have the ability to grab any card you want out of your deck every turn, essentially, which might make your deck 10 times more consistent, and does give you a lot of lines in a match, but we're going to have to see how popular Dragapult ends up being. Hey, man, if Charizard goes back to being the best deck in the format, who knows? Maybe this deck will pop out and actually end up having some good results. We'll have to see on that, but I'm definitely excited for this as one of the best single prize decks from Twilight Masquerade. Now, I think out of all the Ogrepon cards we're getting, I think the Grass Ogrepon EX is easily going to be the one that sees the most amount of play. It's got a really strong ability where you can attach a basic Grass Energy from your hand to itself, and then you get to draw a card. So, not only do you get to put energy on yourself, but you also get to draw a card. It's like having a mini draw engine. Now, this actually synergizes greatly with Raging Bolt EX, which honestly, right now in our current format, it's a bit of a meme. You know, Raging Bolt's kind of a rogue deck at best right now. It's not really the greatest deck ever. However, it actually might be a pretty solid deck when this new set drops. Not only because it does have a good matchup into Dragapult, and it seems to actually be good against other big basic decks too, but it also now has the Ogrepon, so now you have a great way to accelerate energy early on in the game and go fast. The other way to play Raging Bolt would be with Sandy Shocks, right? Sandy Shocks is a pretty good card with Raging Bolt. The problem is Sandy Shocks is more of a late game card. Raging Bolt likes to have that fast early game power, and well, Ogrepon does allow you to do that. You do have some good synergies with the Bug Catching set, which allows you to look at the top 7 cards of your deck and take any combination of Grass Energy and Pokemon you find there. So you do have a way to actually find your Ogrepons a little bit easier, and you can also use it to find Grass Energy alongside having 4 copies of Earthen Vessel within the deck. The Grass Ogrepon is a very cool card, and I definitely think it's the best of the Ogrepons because it does have the most amount of potential to see the most amount of play. Now, there are other archetypes that can play the Grass Ogrepon, and I think I got a couple more here for today, but yeah, Ogrepon Raging Bolt looks like it's going to be a good deck and might be the best way to play the Grass Ogrepon. If you haven't picked up your Raging Bolts yet, I highly recommend getting on that because Raging Bolt's price might go up when this new set does drop. One of the new EXs that I'm really excited to try out is going to be Blissey EX. We finally have another playable Blissey, and this Blissey definitely seems like it could be pretty good. Now, it does have an ability where once turn to turn, you can move a basic energy from one of your Pokemon to another one of your Pokemon. It's a pseudo-energy moving ability. While it's not as good as often as you like text usually says, it does allow you to at least move energy around, and this does combine nicely with some cool cards. Now, the main way to play Blissey does seem to be with Conkeldurr. Now, Blissey does have the attack that does 180 damage, and then you can draw cards until you have 6 in your hand. So you have a nice draw engine with your own attack. Now, the best way to play Blissey could be with Conkeldurr. Conkeldurr does have that ability where when there's a dark energy attached to it, you can actually move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So this can heal your Blissey. Blissey does have 300 HP. Blissey's are known to be pretty tanky, and you do have the Conkeldurr, which does allow you to move the damage around off your Blissey, which is really, really good. So not only are you moving damage off your Pokemon, but you're also able to move your energy around freely. Blissey being a colorless Pokemon is really good. You can play it with Charon's Care. I've also seen some Blissey builds in Japan playing Arceus V-Star in the deck, which also doesn't seem bad either as a way to get energy in play, and Arceus could be pretty good with Blissey because Blissey can also move the energy around for your Pokemon. And the deck can also play Froslass. Froslass does apply extra damage, but also allows you to move more damage off with your Conkeldurr, which is really cool because Conkeldurr will take damage from Froslass's ability, and then you can use Conkeldurr's ability with the Dark Energy on it to, of course, move damage counters off. Froslass does put 10 damage counters on each Pokemon in play with an ability, except Froslass, going in between turns. So basically, you pass, the damage gets spread with Froslass, and then you go back in your turn, and more damage gets spread with Froslass, which is good. Froslass does stack also. Blissey, Froslass, Conkeldurr could be a pretty good deck. There's a few ways to play Blissey that I've been seeing going around. Again, with Arceus, even Bill's just playing 4 Blisseys could be pretty decent. We'll have to see where Blissey goes, but I'm excited to give Blissey EX a try when it does come out. It seems like every set we keep getting a playable Stage 2 Pokemon that can do a ton of damage, and Conkeldurr is going to be the one from Twilight Masquerade. It does have an attack that can do 250 damage for 4 energy. However, if it is affected by a special condition, you get to use the attack for no energy. So yeah, you could do 250 damage for 0 energy if you're affected by a special condition. Now, the best way to do that is to play Brute Bonnet. When you put the Ancient Booster Capsule on it, you can actually poison both active Pokemon, meaning you can poison your own Conkeldurr, and then, of course, you can also poison your opponent's active Pokemon, essentially making Conkeldurr do 260 damage for no energy thanks to poison. You can boost the poison damage with Hisuian Radiant Sneasler to add even more poison. You can even play the Stadium card Perilous Jungle to apply even more poison damage on top of the Sneasler, and you also have cards like Defiance Band and Maximum Belt in the deck to do even more damage. Conkeldurr definitely will be knocking out anything in the active spot, as long as you can keep up the Brute Bonnet pressure. Now, some builds are playing Cloth as your early game attacker, and it makes sense. I mean, Conkeldurr, while it is strong, it's a Stage 2, making it a bit slow to power up. You know, you gotta work a little bit to get it powered up. But when you have Cloth in play, I mean, Cloth effectively does the same thing. You put a double turbo on it, you poison the Cloth, and then you can hit for 170. So you can apply a little bit of pressure early on in the game with your Cloth until you're ready to come out swinging with Conkeldurr. So that does seem to be a nice little combo between the two. Both Cloth and Conkeldurr definitely combine well together because they both work really well with Brute Bonnet. I'm definitely really excited to play Conkeldurr. It's going to be a pretty good budget rogue deck because, I mean, it's fairly cheap. You don't really need a whole lot to build it. It's got no EXs or anything like that, and I'm definitely excited to give Conkeldurr a try. 250 damage for no energy, that is pretty insane. A bit of a goofier one that I wanted to show off was actually going to be an all Ogrepon deck. Yes, this deck plays all 4 different types of Ogrepon. Now, like I said, the Grass Ogrepon is clearly going to be the one that sees most amount of play, including the Fighting Ogrepon. The Fighting Ogrepon has an ability where it can't be damaged by your opponent's Pokemon with abilities. So it's like when you're playing a Alolan Vulpix V-Star and you wall off your opponent completely. Well, the Fighting Ogrepon can essentially do the same thing. On top of that, you have the Water Ogrepon. Now, Wellspring Ogrepon might see a bit of play within Lugia, but I didn't really want to include that as a Twilight Masquerade deck. And then obviously the Fire Ogrepon could be playable within Charizard, maybe, and maybe will be good with Armor Rouge, and really that's about it. But if we were to play them all together for a bit more of a goofier toolbox approach, well, that could be a lot funner. Now, this deck does require you to use the Grass Ogrepon to get your Grass Energy onto your own guy to power them up. Thankfully, all the Ogrepons, other than the Fire Ogrepon, do require, well, actually the Fire Ogrepon does require Colorless Energy too, except for the main attack doesn't, but the secondary attack does. Basically, since all the attack costs are the 1 Water, 1 Fighting, 1 Fire, you can put 2 Colorless Energy on it. So you just go Luminous Energy plus 2 Grass Energy, and you can either attack with the Fighting Ogrepon, or you can use the Water Ogrepon, which does have that attack that can do 120 damage to a Pokemon on the bench and 100 to the active. If your opponent does not bench Manaphy, that can come out of nowhere and take a big knockout. The Fire Ogrepon does a bunch of damage when there's a bunch of damage counters on it. So if your opponent does, like, 130 damage to the Fire Ogrepon, you can swing back really, really hard and take a big knockout. And of course, the deck can play Radiant Charizard as a nice big late-game attack 1-prizer. It's a really interesting concept. It all does come together with the Ogre's Mask item card, which lets you swap an Ogrepon from your discard pile with another one of your Ogrepons in play. So, let's say you want to turn that Grass Ogrepon into the Fighting Ogrepon. Well, you can just Ogre's Mask it into the Fighting Ogrepon, which could be really, really cool. In fact, you can even make yourself have a board state where you just have Fighting Ogrepon in play, because as long as they're in your discard pile, you can just keep swapping out the Ogrepon with the Fighting Ogrepon. There's some really interesting plays you can make with Ogre's Mask in a quad Ogrepon deck. I'm really excited to try this out. It's a bit more of a goofier rogue deck, but it is a really cool one nonetheless. And if you want to really try out all the Ogrepons at once, I mean, hey, give this deck a try. Now, if you're a longtime subscriber to the channel, you know that I love me some quad decks, man. Quad Metagross for the win, baby. But yeah, quad Iron Thorns might be a thing, as literally, as you can see, this list just plays 4 Iron Thorns for the Pokemon. You're like, well, where's the Miraidons? Where's your Regieleki VMAXs at, bro? You're a Lightning deck. Use your Lightning support Pokemon. Well, you're not really trying to do that with Iron Thorns. Now, Iron Thorns does have an ability when it's in the active spot. All non-rule box future Pokemon have no ability. So you shut off Pidgeot, you shut off Charizard, you shut off Radiant Greninja. You basically just slow your opponent down a ton with Iron Thorns being in the active spot. While you have it in the active, you also just use really annoying cards against your opponent, like Crushing Hammer to remove their energy. You have Judge to shrink their hand. And you, of course, have Eerie to remove important item cards. Shutting off a lot of abilities with Iron Thorns being the only Pokemon in play is really funny, because literally your opponent can't boss around it or anything, because it's the only Pokemon in play, right? There's no other way they can stop the ability lock. So you almost have like an almost ability lock in play the entire game, depending on what you're playing against. If some decks are literally just relying on rule box Pokemon for the abilities, well, they ain't doing anything because Iron Thorns is shutting them off completely. And with all these annoying cards in the deck, like the Judges, the Eries, and the Hammers, you're definitely going to make your opponent suffer while you just sit there and beat them to death with the Iron Thorns. It does have an attack that is 140 damage. You can boost that damage with Future Booster Capsule, which the build here does play 4 copies of. And then, of course, you can put a double turbo on it to attack for 2 energy, as it does require a Lightning and 2 colorless energy. Then you set the move and energy from your Thorns to one of your bench Pokemon. If you have 2 Thorns in play, you can just move the energy to your other Iron Thorns and kind of loop between the 2 attackers over and over again with the Future Booster Capsules on, allowing you to basically just keep beating your opponent down. And if they can't do anything, they can have a fun time. This one could be a pretty hilarious deck, and I'm definitely excited to give Quad Iron Thorns a try. Palafin EX is one of the most unique cards we've seen in a long time. It does have a really interesting ability where the only way you can actually put the card out is to actually use the 1 prize Palafin to summon it effectively from your deck, almost like a Yu-Gi-Oh card, which is kind of insane. Basically, when you switch the Palafin from your active to the bench, you can also put a Palafin EX from your deck onto your bench. Now, there are many different ways you could play Palafin. The one way that I'm interested in the most is actually with the Lost Zone engine, mainly because Palafin has good synergy with Lost Box, because you're already trying to play a ton of switching cards anyways to use Comfy's ability over and over again. So why not then play Palafin in the deck? It also gives you a really strong attacker. It has 340 HP. Not only does Palafin have a monstrous amount of HP, it also has a really strong attack that literally does 250 damage for just a single water energy. Yeah, 250 for 1 energy on a 340 HP Pokemon. Kind of crazy. Now, yeah, it's a little bit awkward to get out, but when you're playing a Lost Box deck that can go through their deck pretty quickly, you have the Buddy Poffins in the deck, you can Colress, you can easily chain together a lot of these pieces, you can easily switch out with Jet Energy to easily get that Palafin EX out. And Palafin EX can do so much damage. It's a really beefy attacker to play within the Lost Box deck. It's an interesting list here I saw from Japan that I got for today's video. It's got Raikou in the deck to help against Pidgeot a little bit. You got the Blood Moon Ursaluna, which is a fantastic card within Lost Box. I couldn't really find like an Ursaluna deck by itself, because we've seen more play in just like almost any deck, especially Lost Box. So I couldn't really classify an Ursaluna deck by itself. So I guess you want to put the Ursaluna Palafin together. Boom, there you go, an Ursaluna Palafin deck all in one. But yeah, I'm really excited to try Palafin out. Very unique card, definitely a card that I am very interested in playing, and can't wait to see what people are able to cook up for this card. I think it does have potential to be good. I think we just have to figure out the best way to play it, and I'm definitely interested in a Lost Zone style approach for this card. Now, I did say there's going to be another Greninja deck in this video, and we got Greninja Froslass, which actually might be the best way to play not only Greninja EX, but also Froslass. Now, Froslass has a very interesting ability when you can pile up damage counters on all Pokemon and play with an ability. It's got to be good, right? Now, like I said, this could be the best way to play it, mainly because of how good Froslass is at dealing with one of Greninja's main issues. Now, Greninja, of course, is very good. It's got that cool snipe attack. The problem is if your opponent mentions a Manaphy, it gets a little awkward, and you have to try to play into, like, Cologne and Prime Catcher. With Froslass, you can actually knock Manaphy out with Froslass instead. Manaphy does have an ability, which Froslass does affect. So if you have, like, 3 Froslass in play, that Manaphy going back into your turn will have taken 6 damage counters. You can play down a Hawlucha, maybe play Radiant Alakazam, knock the Manaphy out, and then on your turn, you can then use Greninja's attack to snipe 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. There's some really interesting plays you can make with Froslass within Greninja, even if you're playing against a deck that uses an attacking Pokemon with an ability. This also gives you more damage for your own Greninja, which is actually really, really cool. So it is nice to have Froslass within the deck. So maybe this could be the better way to play Greninja over playing it with Pidgeot, because Froslass does synergize greatly with Greninja's attack, and I'm definitely excited to give this deck a try. Froslass is very interesting, and I'm going to be very curious to see what other people can cook up with this card, because I think there's other ways you definitely can play it, not only with just Blissey and Greninja, which we've looked at so far, but who knows, maybe there's other ways to play Froslass we haven't even considered yet. We'll have to see where it goes. Yeah, Grass Ogrepon is definitely the best of the Ogrepons, because we got another interesting way to play it, and that is going to be with the new Sinestcha EX and the One Prize Sinestcha. Now, Sinestcha One Prizer is going to be your main attacker in the deck, which for 1 Grass Energy lets you do 70 damage. You can discard up to 3 Grass Energy from your Pokemon, and you do 70 damage for each Grass Energy discarded in this way. So you can do 210 damage for 1 energy. Not bad. Now, unfortunately, it's not, as good as Raging Bull, where you can do unlimited damage by discarding as many energy as you want. You are capped at only discarding 3 energy, but with the Grass Ogrepon, you just go 3 Ogrepons in play, you go Ogrepon ability attach, Ogrepon ability attach, Ogrepon ability attach, and boom, just like that, 3 Grass Energy have been put into play for your Sinestcha, and then you discard all those energies and hit super duper hard for 210. Of course, you can boost the damage with Vitality Band to do 220, or you can even play a Maximum Belt as your ace spec to do even more damage to big basic Pokemon. Of course, you can play the EX Sinestcha, which synergizes really nicely with the One Prizer. Its main attack for 1 energy, basically for each Grass Energy in your discard pile, you can shuffle them back into your deck, and then for each Grass Energy you put back into your deck, you can put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. So, much like Hisuian Basculegion, which is a very similar card, where Basculegion puts all the energy from your discard pile back in your deck and then does a bunch of damage for each energy put back, this does the exact same thing, but you actually get to choose the Pokemon you get to attack. Now, that is really, really nice. That means you get to snipe something, which is a bit different than what we've seen before with the Basculegion, where it's only attacking the active. So, having that snipe ability does give this deck a little bit more lines within a match if your opponent does not have Manaphy in play. This build here I found from Japan also has Weird Ear in the deck. I mean, you can put so much energy in play with the Ogrepons that I guess it makes sense to play the Weird Ear. And then, of course, Bibarel in the deck. You already have a draw engine with your Ogrepon, but why not play the Bibarel on top of that to give your deck a little bit more consistency? Of course, being a grass deck means you can play the bug catching set. I mean, the deck will probably play like at least 15 to 14 grass energy, so you're constantly having energy in your hand for your Ogrepon, and then more energy in your discard pile for later on in the game with Sinestcha EX. You can actually use bug catching set, and a lot of the time guarantee quite a bit of grass energy every single turn, alongside 4 Earthen Vessels to just keep constantly putting energy in your hand for that Ogrepon, so you can just keep swinging hard with the One Prize Sinestcha. Definitely an interesting list, and like I said, the Grass Ogrepon is clearly the best of the Ogrepons. And finally, we have Luxray EX. Now, Luxray EX does have a very strong attack that allows you to do 120 damage for 2 energy. You look at your opponent's hand and you discard a card you find there. Getting rid of any card in your opponent's hand is kind of insane, not gonna lie. Now, you can pair that with Iono to shrink your hand in the late game, and you can punish your opponent pretty hard. Now, there are going to be a few ways to actually play Luxray as a control deck. Now, one of the main lists from Japan that I found here actually won a City League. It actually plays Miraidon. Now, Miraidon is looking like a pretty promising deck in the new format due to how good it is against Dragapult, and maybe even Gardevoir if that deck comes back into the format in a big way. We could see Miraidon to see a little bit more play, and maybe pairing it with Luxray could be pretty good. Now, Luxray does have a pretty good snipe attack that lets you force cards out of your opponent's hand. Well, a hand snipe attack, I should say, right? But you do have the other attack, which for 2 lightning energy does 250 damage, and you discard the 2 energy from it. So if you want to go down the route of using Luxray's other attack to take a big knockout on a big basic EX Pokemon, the option is there. And that's one thing Miraidon might even struggle with going forward, is taking out big basics. Yeah, you do have Pogo's Aptos. You could theoretically play 2 if you want to hit higher numbers with Miraidon, but maybe just having Luxray to blow something up is nice. You are a stage 2, so you're a bit slower, but you are a bulkier Pokemon having 310 HP. On top of the fact you can use double turbo energy to not only power up your Iron Hands, but you can also use double turbo with Luxray's first attack that of course does allow you to remove a card from your opponent's hand. Early Luxrays could be very annoying if your opponent doesn't have a lot going on in their hand. If you could just go Rare Candy Luxray double turbo, you can take something away from your opponent and basically slow them down quite a bit with Luxray. And of course, in the late game, you can Iono your opponent to a low hand and then attack with Luxray. And if your opponent doesn't have a great way to deal with that, it can be pretty annoying. Especially if you two-shot something with like Miraidon or Raikou, you can go Iono to a small hand and finish off with Luxray's attack, discard a card, and basically lock them out of the game. So there are some really interesting plays Luxray can make, and we'll have to see if Luxray can see play more as a control deck. I couldn't really find like a control list for Luxray, unfortunately, but Luxray as like a control attacker, I think does have potential. We'll just have to see where that goes when the card does come out. But there you have, folks. Those are 12 new Twilight Masquerade decks with deck lists for today's video. I'm super excited for this new set. Like I said, some pretty game-changing new cards like the Dragapult EX, some really strong A-Spec cards coming out, a lot of really cool cards in the new set, a lot of playable EXs, a lot of fun rogue decks. It's going to be a good time. And of course, if you're new to the second channel, make sure to subscribe down below. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. And I will be streaming a lot of Twilight Masquerade this week, as like I said, the set does come out tomorrow on Pokemon TCG Live. So if you want to catch up on some Twilight Masquerade action, make sure to go check out my main channel and watch the live streams, because I will be streaming. You can also check out my Twitch down below too. And I got daily Twilight Masquerade content coming up on this main channel too, which I'm excited for. I cannot wait for a new era of the TCG, and I can't wait to get testing for NEIC. And I'm excited to see where the meta heads going forward. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll catch you on another video. Bye-bye.